There are many different games that have this similar mechanic of finding a rest spot to replenish and manage resources, all while resetting the whole level so that it's not too easy for the player. Like in the new game coming out, Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. The player rests at a cube and it resets their health, mana, and the enemies. There's also Code Vein, where you're able to level up your abilities at any rest point you find. Today I'm going to be specifically breaking down the bonfire mechanic in Dark Souls 3. The bonfire system has a lot to it. It's a checkpoint system, fast travel, it resets the player's health, Estus flasks enemies in the level, and it can level up to increase the amount of HP and mana recovered when using the Estus flask. Starting from the beginning, when finding a new bonfire, the player will first have to interact with it. A prompt will show up for the player to light the bonfire. Once the player interacts with it, an animation will play for the player that locks them into place, and an animation will play for the bonfire signifying that it's been lit. The checkpoint will be activated when the bonfire has been lit. However, I do want to note that the player's stats stay the same, the Estus flasks don't regenerate, and the enemies in the level don't respawn. So now there will be a prompt for the player to rest at the bonfire. When they interact with the bonfire again, it'll play a different animation from the other one when lighting the bonfire, and then the player will be locked into this animation. The checkpoint will be set again, a fog effect will play indicating the level has been reset, and the player's health, mana, and Estus flask will regenerate. While resting at the bonfire, the player cannot move but can look around using the camera. Certain objects in the world do not get reset when resting at a bonfire. Items picked up by the player won't show up again when the player interacts with them. Certain doors or shortcuts will remain open, and certain enemies will not respawn after dying. After defeating the first boss, the player is introduced to the main hub of the game. This bonfire is different from the other bonfires because it requires an item from defeating the first boss and has a different asset and animation for lighting it. From this bonfire, they will have access to more options than at the beginning of the game. This is where fast travel is introduced, allowing the player to travel to certain new locations and previously lit bonfires. Here you can see the boss is not respawned, and the door that we had open before is still open. Back at the hub, the player can change spells and organize their storage box to store items from their inventory. There's an option that only shows up at this bonfire which says, Burn Undead Bone Shard. This allows the player to level up the bonfire, which increases the amount of HP and mana recovered when using the Estus flask. If we travel to any other bonfires, this option will not be available. Here we have a fully maxed out bonfire. The intensity of the fire is bigger than at level 1. If the player is in combat, the bonfire is unavailable. This is also true when being invaded by another player. I don't have access to online features at the moment, but it's the same as being in combat.